out there with us tonight. Happy Super Bowl Sunday. So for those of you who are big football fans, you're probably not here because you're trying to get ready to watch the big game. But for me, this is called uninterrupted sewing time. So welcome for those of us who are still out here sewing. All right, so tonight we continue with the fruits of the spirit. So if you have not watched my channel before, we are in the middle of a series, and you can find all of my patterns at www.jellyrollclub.com, and my patterns are free. So let me show you where you need to go to find this quilt pattern. So I've already linked it in the description. I've linked the correct one. And let me open my website so you can see what it looks like. So I'm going to share my desktop, and you go straight to my channel, which is my website, which is www.jellyrollclub.com. And it has stuff across the top, and you can see the Fruits of the Spirit project looks like this. And we have all of the resources on one page. It has the video link and the handout for each of the blocks. And we are down here making our orange in the goodness block. So that's what we're going to work on today. And so let me show you what we need to get started. All right, so now that you have that, let me close this extra window I have. Well, that slows my computer down, and so I'm going to close it and open what I've got. Okay, so let me show you what I have. So if you can see my hands, I'm going to be using a 5-inch square. I don't need 5 inches, but that's extra, of Medallion 805, and that's for the outside circle of the orange. I need 4.5 inches, but I'm using just Wonder Under, lightweight Medallion Wonder Under. I'm going to be also using orange for my oranges, and then I'm going to be using some of this for the background, for the orange itself. So this is for the white part of the orange, and then I need some scraps for my orange itself. I haven't made up my mind which of these colors I'm going to use, but I'm leaning towards a yellowy orange, so maybe this one. This one's a Kimberbell. I have Riley Blake. I have different ones. I even have a bandana color, but this one is almost too dark, so I'm trying to avoid something that's too dark and more of a lighter orange, so we'll see. But I have lots of jelly roll strips to choose from. The next thing that I did is I went ahead and I took a Sharpie and I traced with a big fat Sharpie my orange slices. And then when you flip it to the back, it looks like this. You don't even need a light box. When you lay your Wonder Under right on there, you can trace it. And so that's my method. For those of you who don't have a light box, just trace it with a Sharpie. It bleeds right through. And then you can do that. If you don't have Medallion 805, one of the ways that you can do this is simply to heavily starch, like lots of heavy starch on your pieces, and then you're going to cut them out, and then you're going to glue them down with Elmer's washable glue. So you can glue them down with this, and then you can sew all around them. So if you don't have Medallion Wonder Under, you can always use washable school glue to glue down your pieces, and as long as it's dry, it won't gum up your needle. All right, so let's get started. So the first thing that I do when I have a background like this is I will put some, the back of my fabric, not the front, because the Medallion 805 doesn't stick to it. But the first thing that I do is I just mist that with some water. I heat up my iron. So I mist that with a little bit of water on the back side, and then I also add a little bit of starch. And the reason I do that is because I'm trying to take my fabric and make it as nice and stiff as possible. And so then I just take and I press it. It also shrinks a little bit. This fabric has been washed once, but just adding that little bit of liquid gives it a tiny bit of shrinkage. And what that does is it prevents your applique from puckering after you're done with your project. So I always add a little bit of water and a little bit of starch to the backside, never the front, because if you do that to the front, then the Medallion doesn't stick, and neither does the glue. And you want this to be dry, so this part is damp, so I'm going to press it really quick. Hello, everybody. If you are rooting for a Super Bowl team, who are you rooting for? Are you rooting for the Eagles or the Chiefs? Somebody in your family, anyway. because you're busy sewing with me. That's what you're doing. All right, so now that I have the back side of this nice and stiff, then I'm going to cut that. I'm going to go ahead and get my little square, and I'm going to cut it so that it's a 5-inch square. I'm going to put this on the back side right here. And then I'm going to press it down. And that's just a 5-inch square. If you do not have Pellon 805, another method that you could use is the interfacing method. And so if you have seen my Gnome of the Month series, I show you how to use the interfacing method. So that's another way if you don't have Pellon. But I just use Wonder Under. And I try to cover my surfaces whenever I'm working with anything that's glue. This is a non-stick Teflon pad, and I just don't want to get anything on my wool mat, so I use that. Okay, so once this has been pressed, I'm going to set it aside. And what I've done is I've traced all of these little bits in reverse. So this is the front, and I numbered them 1 through 8, and then I flipped it over and I can see 1, 2, 3, and I just traced them on the reverse side. And I'm trying to decide if I should use a darker orange or a lighter orange. This is kind of a yellowy orange. And then this is a lighter batik. So I think I'm going to go with this batik right here. Because I'm not a fan of some of these other colors. They look too much like pumpkin. This one might be okay. But it has these little big things, and I don't want that. All right, so I think I'm going to stick with this one. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a press. There's no starch on this. This is just washed, not starched. And I'm going to press it because sometimes batiks have a little bit of wax. And then I'm just going to put these in order. These all fit very nicely, like this. You can fit them opposite directions to get the most out of your jelly roll strip. You can probably use a half of a jelly roll strip for the entire thing. I'm just going to press in order. And you need 8 pieces. And this right here, 7 and 8. So that is about 10 inches across. So you should be able to get 2 of these no problem out of 1 jelly roll strip. I cut every one, for those of you who are wondering, I cut every one of my scraps into 2.5-inch strips. And I've done that for years. And that's how I became the jelly roll lady, is because literally every scrap in my sewing room gets cut into 2.5-inch strips. And I do that because I think it really does create a system that makes it easier for me to use those scraps. When everything is in 2.5-inch pieces, I can make blocks that are 4.5, 6.5, 8.5, 10.5, and 12.5 very easily, because I can just draw a grid and then use subunits of whatever size. And so for somebody asked me that the other day, they're like, why did you start using jelly roll strips as your thing? And it's because it just makes it mathematically easy to make literally thousands of patterns and use up all my scraps, and then all my scraps work together. Some people will have like a scrap saver system where they use like 2-inch strips and 3-inch squares and all of that stuff, and it just got to be too complicated for me. And so I just literally started cutting everything into jelly roll strips. And I haven't looked back ever since. All right, so these are in order, 1, 2, 3, 4. Super easy. If you do not have Pellon 803, you can always use freezer paper to do the same thing I'm doing right now. So freezer paper is a great thing for this. If you've not seen the freezer paper method, you can go to my channel and there's several videos where I use the freezer paper method in the gnome of the month. So you can go in there and check out those little gnomes. All right. And almost done with these little wedges. Super easy if you use a serrated scissor. This is serrated, and so is this one. These are called Emma Oliver's micro serrated scissors or wonderful scissors. But if you don't have a pair of serrated scissors, I've had these forever. These are by Clover, and they just make it so much easier to cut out applique pieces. Okay. And the last one. Now, just like in my other pieces for this particular project, I've been using inktense, and so I keep getting a lot of fan questions about whether or not inktense is permanent. And so I did a lot of research, and then if you look on the back, right on inktense, it says, transforms into a pure translucent ink which is permanent once dry. And so inktense comes in pencil form and it also comes in block form. And these are ink. They're not regular pencils and they are designed to be permanent. So I've tested these, I've washed my fabric and they stay. So, all right. So now that I have this, I'm going to start my circle. And as you can see through that. I don't know if you can see through that, but I can. And so I'm going to take a pencil and I'm going to draw a little circle in the middle, maybe the size of a dime, just for reference, right? I'm going to fold this in half. And in half again, still with the paper on it. And then I'm going to use this dime. Actually, this is a nickel, kind of as my reference, just to kind of give me a place for all of my bits to go around. And so now that I've got that little circle that I drew in the center, I'm going to start putting these right here because what I want is I want my pieces to fit nicely, right? And so anytime that you have this, you're going to have to kind of make them fit and you're going to make sure that they all fit. 5, 6. I'm going to use that nickel as the kind of the guide in here. I'm going to move this over, and I need to make sure that I haven't like misdrawn these. I can just do 7 really, and I don't have to do 8 because I've got some extra space. Or if I want these to be tighter, I can just trim them and make them tighter. I want this to be a little bit bigger of an orange. So I'm going to come out, and I think I'm going to use that center to align all of the tips of my orange. And then I'll be able to get number 8 in there, and that'll be the correct size. So that's how we're going to do that. So now that I have it, and so I'm using a nickel, which a nickel is about 3/4 of an inch. And so I use that nickel to align all of these little bits, and now these will fit. And this one's a little bit bigger than what I want because I just want a tiny bit in between. And so that looks pretty good. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat up my iron and I'm going to start removing these one at a time. I'm going to use the back of this right here. And I'm going to pierce it and I'm going to lay it down. Right where I want it, just there. Now this one I left too much on there, so I'm just going to trim that off. And then I'm going to use the back, not the sharp part, but the back to just score that paper lightly and put that down. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to get the orange to look like an orange. It says, Tina says, can you use So Light Fusible? I don't know what So Light Fusible is, but there are FlexiFuse. There's lots of, in other countries, they have different supplies, so I'm not sure what's available in your area. Tina, are you from Ireland? I think you're from Ireland. If you have any questions, drop them in the chat and I will be going through and trying to answer all of your questions. And when you guys put comments, like if you watch the replay and you put comments, I try to go in and answer those as well. I work a full-time job as a teacher, so I don't always get time to quickly respond, but I do try to get to that a couple of times a week. I'm also a full-time grandma and a wife and a mommy. I have 3 grandchildren and 2 children and a husband, so I live a busy life, but quilting is my obsession, and so I make time for it no matter what. It's a gift I give to myself and a gift I share with others. I hope you are enjoying all of these projects. I love sharing these because I don't want my favorite hobby to die as an art form. I think that not as many young people are learning how to sew, and I'm hoping that by having this channel out here and having supplies that are easy to find and using just a few tools, that more people will join me in this adventure. There we go, look at that. And now it's fitting in there. And I think this is looking pretty good. I like the choice I made. So let's look. Now that I have all of these laid out, and my suggestion is to lay them out first and then just use like a pin to put them in place, and do that before you press. You see, just kind of get all of your pieces right there, and that looks mostly like a circle. And so now that I like this, I'm going to take my iron, I'm going to heat it up, and I'm going to fold this over and pull this off carefully. I'm going to fold this over on top, and then I'm going to press it with my pressing cloth, with it inside my pressing cloth. And so I'm going to just kind of grab it. And the reason I'm doing that is because I don't want my pieces to move. And I don't want to put too much heat on there. And so once I have that and they're fairly set, there we go. Now I can do the rest. And I'm not too worried about that pencil mark right there, because I'm going to show you. The reason I use regular school pencils is because they erase. So if you take a regular pencil, if you take the eraser and you go like this, it literally erases those pencil marks and they come right off. Just like that. It gets rid of those pencil marks right out of there. And when you wash them, the pencil marks come out. So standard graphite, look at that. When you're done, it gets all of those marks right off of there. And you take a little brush and then brush that off. Yes, this is my lint brush for my sewing machine. All right, so now that I have that, and I like how my orange looks, I can cut this out. Because if I hold it up to the light, it looks like it's about the same size. If you don't like this one, you can heat it up and remove it, but I think it looks just fine because oranges are not perfectly symmetrical. Not every orange is. And then I'm just going to take and I'm going to cut along this edge, leaving about 1/4 of an inch all the way around. And I'm going to make my orange just like this. This is like a freestyle orange. And so now the orange is coming along, and I'm going to get to the end, and I love how that looks. That orange is looking exactly the way I want it to. And now I have this, and I'm going to put something underneath here so that it doesn't soak into my mat. But now I'm going to use these right here. And so these babies are inktense blocks, and they're just like the pencil. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to add orange all to the outer edge, just like this. And these don't have to be sharpened like the pencils do. And I'm going to add a little bit of orange to the outside of all of this. I'm also going to add a little bit of orange to the middle. And then I'm going to come back around. the outside of that orange, just like this. And this is permanent once it dries, so you have to be very careful. If you have the block, you can shave it, just like I did there, and turn it into a liquid and brush it on. But I am not, and then I'm just going to spritz this with water, just like this, with my mister. I'm going to mist that, and then I'm going to take and I'm going to rub those edges, just like this, and let that kind of blend in those edges. And so what that is doing is that's adding orange to that edge of that orange. Just blending it in. Just using the water that's on here as it beads up. And then when I'm done, I'm just going to dab it with a damp cloth, just like this. Wipe it all off. And I still have my paper on the back. And I'm going to give it a press. And what that's doing is it is drying that ink so that I can see how it's going to dry, because this dries translucent, and so sometimes you need to add a couple of layers. So that's looking pretty good. I'm going to spritz that middle. I'm going to rub it in so that it blends. Just gives it like a little halo effect. And I like how that looks. I have this that faded a little bit more than what I want it to. So sometimes the pencils are better because they push the ink deeper into the fabric. So if you find that it needs a little bit more color, this is a great time to add. You can always add red. So this one is like poppy red. So if I wanted to pop out some more, I could always just add a little bit of this red to the outside and mix it with a little bit of orange. And so I'm just going to go in here, and this is wet a little bit on the edges, and it's okay. And so look at that. That's looking pretty good. I can add a little bit more orange. And so sometimes, like I said, sometimes the pencil is better. Now I could have done this while the square was still there, but I'm okay doing it like this. And so I like how this is looking. I am going to give it some heat from my iron because that is going to make it flat. You can, if you don't have ink pens like I do, you can always use a skinny ring of like fabric just like this and just do a skinny ring underneath there. So cut it so that it's the same size, slightly bigger, and then just put a ring of orange fabric. Or if you wanted to take and do a heavy satin stitch all the way around with orange thread, you could also do that. So you don't have to do ink like I'm doing. But that's how mine is going to look. And I like how this is looking, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove this paper off the back. First it needs to dry. I'm going to dry that. Make sure it's not damp at all. And that's how I'm finishing mine. And I like the way this looks. And then I'm going to trim any kind of stray little fuzzy threads that I have. And I'm going to go ahead and pull this off. And it should just come right off. And then once I'm done, I can fuse the entire thing down to my square. And I haven't killed the glue, so that's a good thing. So now that I have it, I like how she turned out. I'm going to move this out of the way. I like how this looks. I'm going to take my block that I have sitting over here, and I think that I want to put it on this one. It's going to sit right there, and I think that is going to be a fabulous looking block. And then I'm just going to fuse this down. And I am ready to do some stitching around this thing right here. I can take some orange thread and stitch all the way around. And so I'm going to bring it over to my machine. Let me see if I turn this machine on. And I just have some gray thread. Let me see if you can see my sewing machine. You see my sewing machine? I'm going to bring it over here. And then I'm just going to sew all the way around that edge. And then I'll decide later what it is that I'm going to do. But for now, I can just go all the way around that edge. There we go. Oh, I have it backwards. And I'm anchoring that on the outside, just like this. This is my vintage lady. She's kind of loud. And I'm going to come around. And I'm sewing right on the inside of that orange piece right there. And I'm just going to come around. And I'm going to overlap it. But before I go anywhere, I'm going to raise this so I can pull this away. And let me come back so I can show you what it looks like. And she is looking pretty good. I was cleaning my vintage lady. My sewing machine that I'm using today is a 401A, and she's like 76 years old. She's a lovely little thing. And I like picking up abandoned old rickety looking sewing machines and getting them working. And there she is. There is the block. And so I think that this is going to be absolutely delightful. I'm going to come in and I'm going to straight stitch along all of these pieces. And that is my orange, and oranges are full of goodness. So I hope that you will enjoy this block and add it to your quilt. There's mine. I think that's looking pretty good. And so now I just need to make a second one, because in this quilt there are 2 of each block. So there's 2 of each of them. And then next time, let me see, somebody said, what are we going to do next time? The supplies are going to be the same. So it's just your fabric and your stars. And then next time, let me see what I'm showing on here so you can see. We have Faithfulness, which is an apple. So that's what we're doing on February 23rd. Then March the 9th, we have Gentleness. March 23rd is Self-Control. And then April 13th, I'm going to show you how to add embellishments. I also have another quilt that I've been working on right behind me. So if you are following my website and you are a friend of mine on Facebook, you're going to see information. I'm also going to put it on the YouTube channel. So there's a portion of the YouTube channel called the Community tab. And so if you look on there, I put stuff there sometimes for those of you who are not on social media. But let me just show you what I've got coming. So I'm going to share my desktop. And so if you notice, it says the Cartwheels quilt, and that is the quilt that's behind me that I'm currently working on. So if you want to make a super easy quilt and you want to use all of your leftovers, that quilt behind me uses 27 jelly roll strips that are colored and 27 jelly roll strips that are of a background. And so I'm going to be doing this with a navy background and using this one with a cream background. So if you want to make that, let me know. And I will show you how to do all of the banners for this quilt in a next episode. So as we go along, I have some more stuff to do, and I'm going to start working on my banners because it's almost time for us to start putting this quilt together. We only have like 2 more months for us to finish this one. All right, everybody, it is 6:30. It is time for me to play with my granddaughter and go watch the Super Bowl. Go Chiefs. Sorry if you're an Eagles fan, but don't hate me. If you're enjoying this project, please share with your friends. If you have church friends that love the fruits of the Spirit or are doing a Bible study and want to learn how to sew, send them my way. I appreciate you. Please like and subscribe so you don't miss things. And if you have questions, send me an email. I'd like to respond to my messages. All right, everybody. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Happy sewing, everybody.